This time, from non-league non-entities to cup final heroes, the crazy rise of Wimbledon.
'Cause I'll stay a wild rover forever and more.
Hello and welcome to By Far the Greatest Team, a podcast in which football fans attempt the impossible, to rank once and for all who is the greatest team of all time. My name's Graham Dunn, making the case for Oxford United where it doesn't belong. And joining me, as ever, is a man so comfortable with the science of football and the numbers that he makes Dr. Heinz Wolf look like a primary school student. Jamie.
Brilliant. Yeah, I'm not only just comfortable with the stats, I'm also comfortable that our 1980s obsession, which seems to have been the case for a few weeks, hasn't affected me because, I'm really happy that we're on the road again tonight. I think we're going to push it with Cool and his crazy gang, maybe pour some red wine as we talk about Stranger Things from South London. And I think, Graham, it's important we try not to cut a long story short, which will be tricky as the Wombles of Wimbledon were hungry like with a wolf and just couldn't get enough of winding up their rivals, proper dark arts merchants that could make a flock of seagulls take flight. We've got a story tonight which proves you don't stop believing. A wild 1980s tale, like a full-on teenage riot where the crazy gang crashed the party and beat the Culture Club in the FA Cup final. And I'm not obsessed with the 1980s.
Wow, this is what you spent your research on. Crowbarring in 1980 song titles, as if we hadn't alienated half of our audience. What can I say? Yes, we are absolutely continue to be stuck. But this is a story that at least begins in the 1970s. And it's a really incredible story. There's so much to tell about it, but we're going to focus in on this Wimbledon period of when they enter the league and culminating in their FA Cup win. As becomes something of tradition when we look at a South London side, we have no option but to turn to Stuart Burgess. Welcome back.
Thanks, Graham. Thanks, Jamie. I'm still trying to recover from that onslaught of 1980s song titles. Quite phenomenal. Well done, sir. That's just brilliant. I was trying to kind of come up with a witty riposte, but I can't. So there you go. But no, very glad to be back and good to see you guys.
What I like about this story is there's obviously the last time you were on, Stu, we were talking about Crystal Palace and the Steve Coppell's Palace and the Right and Bright. There's a lot of connection between this Wimbledon side and Crystal Palace.
Yeah, obviously the Ron Nodes connection. Ron Nodes was chairman of Wimbledon, I think, when they first got into the league, and then obviously went across to Palace. You've got a number of players that went backwards and forwards. Dave Bassett, I think, famously was manager of Crystal Palace for about an hour and a half. Probably just slightly longer than Jamie's 1980s reference boost there. Yeah. So, and then the ground sharing thing. So, a lot of crossover between these two clubs over the years.
On last week's pod, we were talking about cup shocks, and we ended with the beautiful game, which Wimbledon becoming the first non-league team to beat a top-flight side away from home in 1975 when they beat Burnley, and pretty heroically almost beat Leeds, falling in a replay due to an own goal. Quite harsh to call it an own goal, but it was a deflection off the knee of one Harry Bassett. I quite enjoy that we have some continuity here because Dave Bassett is quite a central figure in this. Now, I haven't seen any of Dave Bassett playing football. He'd sort of retired before my day, and obviously it was kind of non-league stuff. But I believe he was quite a feisty character in midfield.
No kidding. Yeah. I haven't seen him either, but that doesn't take a stretch of the imagination to imagine him kind of going around stirring things up in the middle of the park, does it? Just as a complete aside, and I've only just remembered this because my daughter's currently sort of potentially looking to move. And at the end of Plough Lane, there's a relatively new block of flats called Bassett House. Is that a coincidence? I wonder.
Can't be. That can't be, can it?
No. Anyway, that's apropos of nothing, really.
Harry Bassett. So I was doing some research on this because I assumed it was. I was trying to think. There is a Bassett. He must have got that nickname after, and there was a racehorse I think called Harry Bassett. But Jamie, you think that might not be the origin of it?
I think the origin's going to be pretty boring, to be honest, because when I looked at this, I went down the rabbit hole thinking it was after Clint Eastwood's character Dirty Harry because of the connection with the style of footballer. I think, even though none of us watched him play, that Dave Bassett was. I think he generally liked to build the teams in his own image. So, yeah, I kind of picked up on a thread that his nickname Harry came from Dirty Harry. But I doubt this now because I have learned since through doing further research, spending far less time on researching why Dave Bassett was called Harry than looking up 1980s song titles, is I think it's down to his dad. His dad was called Harry and he was called Harry as a junior. And I think it just stuck and his mum would call him Harry. So I don't know which is true. But for the purposes of going on for tonight, I'm going to stick with what I think should be the truth, and that is that Dave Bassett was named Harry after Clint Eastwood's character, Dirty Harry, because that's way more fun.
Better than being named after the cartoon character Fred Bassett, who was actually a Basset hound.
But you see, I think Fred Bassett would work. I think he was a sort of a tenacious, bite your ankles kind of midfielder, and I think that is Fred Bassett.
Yeah. I think you're right. There would have been a greater degree of logic if he'd been known as Fred, wouldn't there?
Wasn't Bertie Bassett the TV advert character that would feed licorice all sorts to children?
Yeah, so could have had Bertie, could have had Fred. I'm
just jumping on the Bassett bandwagon here.
Yeah.
When I think about this Wimbledon side, I immediately think of Dave Bassett, and I assume this is Dave Bassett. But, in fairness, Dave Bassett neither gets them promoted into the league nor wins the FA Cup. So he kind of misses these two major moments, probably the biggest moments. I'm not saying he hasn't put a shift in, but...
Yeah, true. It was Alan Batsford got him into the league, wasn't it?
Mm.
A name that's sort of quite similar to Dave Bassett. So I think for a number of years, Alan Batsford just disappeared into a sort of Dave Bassett kind of miasma in my head. But he wasn't there long after they got into the league, Batsford, was he? He kind of got replaced quite early on, I think. Looking at some of the stuff I've done, you referenced it earlier, Jamie, but it was back then. There was no automatic promotion from non-league or, as it is now, the National League. It was a case of getting voted in. And looking at Wimbledon's kind of track record in the seasons building up to when they got voted in, it's enormously impressive. As we said, they beat Burnley away in the Cup. They drew away at Ellen Road, narrowly lost the replay. I think they won the Southern League title 3 years on the bounce. And so kind of they were really kind of putting a case forward to be elected. And so about your superior knowledge on this, Jamie, I don't know much about the election process, but I think it was all the other clubs could vote for who they wanted to stay in or get promoted up. Yeah,
it's a gloriously opaque way of finishing the season, isn't it? I think it was it the bottom four in the league had to reapply?
I think it was the bottom four, yeah.
The top three, and then most years, mysteriously, who knew that all the league clubs banded together and that none of the non-league ones went up?
It must have been an environment in which brown envelopes proliferated.
I think it's definitely where the term the turkeys are voting for Christmas, where the turkeys actually got together and voted. There is going to be no Christmas.
Yeah.
Because non-league teams as they were then were definitely unwelcome felt. So the election process has kind of been going on since the Football League, the English Football League started. But basically between 1950 and 1979, any team from the non-leagues could apply for league status and they could receive votes. But it was quite a closed group. Only 7 teams in that period between 1950 and 1986 got elected to the Football League, and we've covered a few of them here. One of them is a very dear football club to one of our key members on this podcast now. So Oxford got promoted via election, 1962. They replaced Accrington Stanley. And after that, it's really in the 70s where it does pick up a bit. And you're right, Wimbledon were knocking on the door for a while. They'd won the Amateur Cup in the 60s. They were a top non-league team. In one instance, there was 2 non-leagues. There was the North and the South, and Wimbledon played off against the winners of the North, which was Wigan Athletic, and Wimbledon won that. So they had bragging rights to be the best non-league team. But even with that bragging rights, they still couldn't pick up many votes. I think, Graham, you've got the actual votes they received to get into the Football League. But then I think it changes when Ron Nodes gets involved, our man with big ideas and a love for football, he comes on board at Wimbledon, and I think he starts changing the mindset in terms of how Wimbledon are going to become a league club, because he treats it like an election and he goes on a campaign.
But yeah, Jamie, you're absolutely right. One of the key things with Wimbledon was that they just became more political. They kind of worked out. They kept winning the league, and the first year I think they get 4 votes, and bottom of the pile. It doesn't really improve in 1976 when again they win the league, and then when Ron Nodes gets involved, he does basically go on a PR and charm offensive.
The way that the system's done is that all the league clubs vote. So, if you're a Division 1, Division 2 team, you get to vote as well, even though it's not really having any impact on your football club. It's a footnote. But I think Ron Nodes actually did visit all of the top teams. So I think he all but a handful, he went into the Division 1 and Division 2 teams to canvass on behalf of Wimbledon being elected into the Football League. So he is really targeting the teams at the top and not looking at the ones at the bottom who clearly, if you're a Division 4 team, you're not going to be voting a non-league team in, because that can come back to bite you very soon.
It is interesting, though. So they do go up, and you're absolutely right. Basford hangs around, I think it's about Christmas-ish, January time, when he packs it in. And you've definitely got this sort of challenge of adjusting or in some ways still being part-time and sometimes full-time. I should give them a name check if you do want to know more. There's a fabulous site called Historical Dons, which has some brilliant...
Yeah, I stumbled on that one, yeah.
For anything I say tonight, I owe them a debt of honour of some kind. But you can see, and I think they talk, that talks about that Bassett was combining the club with what is described as an executive role in the concrete industry. Now, that sounds quite sinister, to be honest.
Yes.
I don't quite know what's involved in that. But I think taking the sinister implications of it, I think, it is the challenge that they are trying to do a sort of, in many cases, extra training session, trying to match full-time clubs whilst from many of the players still in a part-time environment. And I think that's probably maybe behind some of the challenges. And there's obviously have to have a whole change of players around this point. But it's at this stage that Dario Gradi, who is the assistant, he takes over, and Dave Bassett, who I think was on the coaching staff by then, becomes assistant manager. So he's definitely involved in that stage. And what I like about this period is you start to see some, because I was curious as to whether there are any players from the non-league days who go on to that top flight, I should call it, status. And it is interesting seeing some of these familiar names come up.
Yeah, you had, you're probably going to move on to these, but the first sort of season or two, there were a couple of people that kind of like Alan Cork, Glyn Hodges, Wally Downs, who became a kind of, cult figure at Wimbledon through the years and went back to manage AFC for a couple of seasons. So, you could kind of see these things sort of coming through. I think their first season, they kind of did a bit of consolidation. They finished mid-table. And then Gradi, who clearly was a very good coach and could clearly get the best out of players. His career's, sort of taken a bit of a knock over the last few years with various things. But he got them up after 2 seasons, didn't he? Got them promoted. But then they yo-yoed a bit, I think, up, down kind of thing.
This is sort of one of the incredible things, and Jamie, I'll bring you in on some stats on this in a bit. You think about this, there's this incredible rapid rise of Wimbledon. They go from entering the league to being in the top flight within 9 years. Yet they spend the first 5 years messing about, and they end up back where they began.
Yes. Yeah.
It's not like clear line. They just keep getting promoted and relegated.
Yeah, and I guess that's kind of earning your spurs to an extent, isn't it? They had, as you say, 5 seasons where they kind of were up and down between the bottom 2 divisions, building, ethos or, a philosophy, bringing players through from the youth team and kind of just consolidating at that level. It's interesting, actually, one of the things that I picked up was that first season consolidation and second season, 78, 79, they went up. They came back down in 79, 80. After they got relegated that season, on Nodes entered talks with the Milton Keynes Development Corporation about moving to Milton Keynes. Now, I didn't realise that kind of idea had been gestating for that long.
I mean, I wasn't even sure that Milton Keynes existed back then.
Yes.
I knew it was a new town.
I mean, this is a theme with Wimbledon, though. It's a football club with an incredible history, an incredible story throughout its history as well, in both parts, as we get towards the end of this. But yeah, I mean, it's we touched on Crystal Palace. There was the flirting with Milton Keynes, as we just mentioned, which then happens again. You've got the whole idea of moving the whole football club to Dublin. It just seems to be that there was never any peace for this football club being, home of the tennis championships.
Yeah, and your immediate association with Wimbledon, if you're sort of not particularly sport orientated, is tennis. It's quite a wealthy area. You could hardly get a greater contrast, I would suggest, between Workington and Wimbledon. Yeah, and it's kind of what is better suited to sustain a football club. I mean, Workington is a town with a population of 25,000, but if you get everybody behind it, then why not? Whereas Wimbledon, the population is larger, but you've got Chelsea up the road and Arsenal and Spurs not far away and Palace and so on. So it's not an immediate sort of area. Certainly back in that era, you think, yes, this cosy suburb of London can support a team in the top flight. Maybe, which is why they kept trying to have to look at alternatives, look at moving, look at reinventing themselves.
You can see the whole club is, throughout its time, it's absolutely unsustainable. I think their attendance in their first game in the Premier League is 6,300. They're trying to compete with, this is before TV money as well, really. So you are talking about a time where attendances are really quite...
172. I actually highlighted it in red because I was think, really? Don't know me.
Yes. I mean, this kind of leads into the idea that Sam Human, who had the controlling, I think 100% controlling interest in Wimbledon by the early 1980s, is probably, a businessman who's one of those football chairmen that was always keen to be seen. He wasn't one that was quite happy to stay around in the background. And he was clearly looking at all of the possible commercial opportunities to grow this football club through greed or through the love of the football club. That's to be decided, I guess. But when you've got this man in the background with this ambition, he's always going to be looking for the next big thing, for this thing he's created, which is incredible, through Wimbledon FC. But equally, he probably wants to see more than 6,000 through the gates. And if you move to a stadium in Milton Keynes or you move to a stadium in Dublin, and I don't think they're ideas that I would ever get on board with as a football fan, I can get it from an owner's perspective, because suddenly you could be getting 30, 40, 50, 60,000 potentially through the gate. And as we know anyway, that wasn't the case.
And I mean, you mentioned Sam Hammam there, Jamie, and I think kind of when Hammam took over from Nodes was, I think, where you start seeing the trajectory suddenly accelerate, because they were still in this yo-yo period, and Nodes had obviously started conversations with the Milton Keynes Development Corporation. That didn't get anywhere, and I think he was kind of frustrated by the lack of growth opportunities. So in 1981, he left for Crystal Palace, took over Crystal Palace, took Dario Gradi with him, and he was replaced by Sam Hammam, and Gradi was replaced by Dave Bassett. So there you've got, the two pillars of that growth period suddenly dropped in at the same time in 1981.
And by 81, so Bassett takes over a team that's sort of mid-table in the fourth tier. He does get them promoted immediately. And as you say, he's got, by this stage, we've got a few of those familiar faces being in there. Wally Downs and Glyn Hodges are both youth players who break through. I can never imagine. So Wally Downs makes his debut as a 17-year-old. And whether it's just the combination of him having the first name Wally and me thinking about Greg Downs, but I just cannot imagine Wally Downs being 17.
No.
I can't compute this. I kept looking. Oh, surely he was 37 by this stage.
There are certain people that you can never imagine being young, aren't there? Roy Kinnear, the actor, being another one. It kind of, was he ever young? Brian Blessed, I suppose, is another. But, as you say, you had Wally Downs coming through and Glyn Hodges. Dave Bassett was there at this point. He'd been signed from Edgware, I think.
Yeah.
And Kevin Gage was another one who was coming through the ranks, who actually left before they got to the top flight, but clearly was a very, very good player, went on to play for Villa and succeed there. So, and Alan Cork was on the books then. It was banging them in.
And Alan Cork is incredible. So Alan Cork, they signed on a free transfer from Swansea, and I don't think anyone paid any money for Alan Cork during his entire career. I think there might not have all been free transfers, and there might have been some negligible or tiny sort of bit. And this is a guy who scored in every division, who scored... This is just in league games. I can't find any record of what he did in cup games, but 155 goals in 500 league games, and nobody's paid any money for him.
Yeah.
You do find this. There are some players who just, each time they go up a level, it just works. Then
they just raise their game to that level.
Yeah. Absolutely incredible player, Alan Cork, I have to say. And as you say, Dave Bassett becomes a big character. They do get promoted in 82, second tier, but then they get relegated again in that one.
It's one step forward, two steps back, isn't it? And I think it was the 82-83 season, Bassett basically decided that a paradigm shift was needed and started developing the style for which this Wimbledon team was known and loved throughout the land. And, you can mock it, but it's back. The more direct approach is back. Long throws, corner techniques, all of this stuff. So who's to say that Bassett wasn't a visionary?
Go on, Jamie. I know you like style. It was just whacking the ball up long, wasn't it?
Well, it was more than that. But yeah, that was the degree of it. We've talked about it before, positions of maximum opportunity. Before that term ever was invented, this is what Wimbledon were doing. They were playing long balls. I can't substantiate this, but I think in the mixer, that football term that's been used, put it in a mixer, I think this comes from this era, and I think this potentially comes from Wimbledon, because I've definitely seen with documentaries that John Fashanu, who arrived at the club in the second half of the 90s, is yelling at his players, get it in the mixer, get it in the mixer. So they've either created this phrase or they're owning it. But, they were physical as well. And they did a lot of the stuff off the pitch. We've marvelled over John Beck's dark arts in his Cambridge United team. Wimbledon are doing this in the 1980s. They're creating chaos and disruption, but what they're doing is they are gaining the psychological edge on their opponent. So it's easy to criticize, and I do remember this Wimbledon team in the 80s, and they were criticized for their style of play. In fact, myself back then was probably a bit of a twatty purist when it comes to football, and I probably criticized them. But as an adult, I reflect on it now. There are no right ways or wrong ways to play. There were just ways to play. Wimbledon had a way, and it was super effective. And you're absolutely right. It's being used today. It's just like the propeller heads. It's all just a bit of history repeating.
Yeah, and you cut your cloth to suit the material you've got, don't you? Wimbledon played a style that suited them. From the season Bassett introduced it, 5 years later they were in the top flight. So you can't really argue with its effectiveness. You also can't really argue with its lack of popularity on a broader spectrum. I was looking at in the period between, was it 1981 to 86, Wimbledon got promoted, 79 to 86, Wimbledon got promoted 5 times. And given that, you would expect that the PFA Team of the Year would have occasionally featured some Wimbledon players. Only one featured in that entire period, and that was Alan Cork in the Division 4 team in 1979. They weren't loved, even before it became the thing not to love them. They weren't loved.
Yeah, it just plays into the narrative that the style of football isn't appreciated. And probably, their intimidation as well, because that is a big factor as well. Yeah, direct, combative, psychological, they're very imposing. And also, the brilliant thing about it, with all of this aggression and combativeness on the pitch, there's unity as well. You can't deny the fact that they're all in it for the same goals. Now, a lot of that may tie into some of the heavy-handed culture that was part of this football club, but they're all buying into it.
There's also some innovation, which you can't sort of forget as part of this. So I don't think I've I've imagined this and don't quite know when he began doing it, but isn't Dave Bassett the first keeper to sort of bounce the ball a couple of times, get to the edge of his box, and then roll it out of his box to then step upfield and whack it, which you see quite a lot now. Well, you don't see keepers do it at all now, but they did used to be the thing where a keeper would get to the edge of the box and instead of just doing the big drop kick, would roll it out to gain a few more yards and then belt it. And I think Beasant was certainly the first one characterised as doing it.
Yeah, certainly I remember him doing it, and I don't remember many other goalkeepers of that era doing it. And the objective was to get it in the mixer, as you said, Jamie, roll it out 10 more yards. That means it's coming in over the opposition goalkeeper's head, doesn't it? So,
Well, I mean, they were using, I don't know how scientific it was, but they were definitely using data analysis. They worked out if they were able to get the ball into the opponent's box X amount of times, and they were able to limit the balls in their particular third X amount of times in every single football match, they would reduce their chances of losing. They were looking at not how we're going to win this game, it's how we're not going to lose this game. So, their tactics were designed to traverse through the leagues, which they did, and then when they get to the Premier League, they hold their own.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, and Vinnie Jones was holding somebody else's.
Yeah. I don't doubt they used data analysis, Jamie, but they also used sort of fairly direct intimidatory tactics, didn't they? With or indirect intimidatory, I mean, Plough Lane was a non-league stadium, and I don't get the impression they spent a great deal of money on it until they moved out. And that was used as a weapon because the facilities were dreadful. They never turned the heating on in the away dressing. Apparently they used to put salt in the opposition's tea, all this kind of stuff. And that was part of the shtick, wasn't it? So you'd get, as you say, Man United and all the sort of pampered fellas from there, and Liverpool coming down and having to squeeze into a dressing room with a shower that you had to pull the handle. And they're all thinking, what on earth is going on here? So immediately they're on the back foot.
Instead of Wimbledon going down, getting their customary relegation once they've been promoted, the new direct football is working. They get promoted again at the end of that season. That is when Derek Grady moves on from Palace, and you have this brief moment where Dave Bassett becomes Palace manager. But it's a really odd thing.
Yeah, I mean, is it 4 days? He accepts the manager's job at Palace, and then, as I read, after 4 days of soul searching, he realises that Wimbledon is where his heart is, and he comes back. Who knows what the soul searching involved, but clearly he came back to Wimbledon, and that would appear to have been the right decision because their trajectory continued in that direction. Whereas Palace, if I remember, around about that time, were treading water in the mid-'80s, weren't they? Actually, was Bassett's departure when Koppel arrived?
Koppel, yeah. So Koppel arrived straight after that, yeah.
Well, everyone's a winner from that scenario.
Everyone's a winner.
Aren't they? Yeah.
Absolutely. I think Dave Bassett said at the time that after he accepted the Crystal Palace role, that his soul searching, as you put it, I think he decided he'd been banging on to his players about loyalty, and then he's jumped ship at the earliest opportunity, and decided that I can't be preaching loyalty and not practicing it. And I think also, I can't remember if this comment is true, but I think he also said, I felt I just had better players at Wimbledon.
So I'm inclined to agree with it, because it's not like he's just moved into the area, and it's not like he doesn't know the chairman already. He knows everyone involved. It's kind of, there can be no surprises there, but he does stay at Wimbledon, and then after a season of stability in the second tier, they do go on to get promotion. Now, by this stage, we are starting to see some familiar names. They spent a bit of money on Lawrie Sanchez, who now, even the site I found this fact on, I say fact, was, but Lawrie Sanchez is believed to be the first player to get a red card for a professional foul. So after that, I saw that. After that rule change, and it was against Oxford, of all teams, lucky beneficiary.
Lawrie Sanchez also had a degree in business management from Loughborough University, so a smart fella. Funnily enough, my friend Ben's brother Phil knew him at Loughborough, so there you go. We have independent verification. It's not.
There we go. Yes, he was there.
not just acclaim. Sanchez was a good example of the way, building on the players that have been there for a while, like Cork and Hodges and Beasant. They'd gradually been accruing pretty decent players.
Yeah.
I think when they were in still Division 3, they signed Nigel Winterburn from Oxford, I believe.
From Oxford, yeah.
Winterburn, who went on to have a stellar career with Arsenal and so on. Lawrie Sanchez joined from Reading. He'd had a pretty solid career already. And then you had people like Carlton Fairweather, who they picked up from Tooting, who went on to become a fairly crucial part of the Premier League team. So it was almost by osmosis that they started pulling this team together.
And they've also got, quite a strong kind of youth setup, or players that are coming through from the youth. Glenn Hodges, we already discussed. You have, I think, Brian Gale. I think Andy Thorne is a massive player, comes through. I think the other rivals, probably Dennis Wise, I think, joins in that season. But the big push, you can see there's a point at which they think, blimey, we have a genuine chance of going up here. And they choose to actually, and they splash a bit of cash for them, 125,000 on John Fashanu from Millwall, who has an instant impact.
Yeah, they splashed the cash on Fash the Bash.
Absolutely brilliant.
I didn't rehearse that earlier, unlike John Motson's Crazy Gang Culture Club,
Yes.
which was the most carefully rehearsed ad-lib ever.
Yeah.
I mean, Fashanu, he was ideally suited to their style of play. He was big, he was ugly, he had an eye for goal, he was intimidatory. He kind of delivered on everything. And, they got him. I was actually quite surprised because I kind of assumed he'd been there in that entire season, but they only signed him in March.
Yeah.
So, it obviously was what do we need to pull ourselves over the line? And they identified Fashanu and off they went. Yeah. I think he scored 4 goals in 9 games, which is not a bad return.
Yeah. Their crucial goal, the goal that gets them their victory against Huddersfield, that gets them promoted, is scored by Lawrie Sanchez, not the last important goal he will score.
No.
And so Wimbledon, within the space of 9 years, have made it all the way to the top flight. Jamie, is that unusual?
No, but it has happened before. It is exceptional. Their ascent through the lower leagues, really, if you discount the yo-yo years anyway, between the first few seasons when they're a league club, when they're in Division 4, it's actually 4 seasons it takes them to get to the top league from the bottom league, which is incredible. So I guess their ascent from the non-leagues into the Premier League, the top flight, not the Premier League, Division 1 as it was called then, is exceptional. But it has been done by other clubs. You follow one yourself, Graham, but it took that team a few extra years. Wigan Athletic have also done it. Now, there is possibly history happening right in front of us where that happens again and sooner with what's going on at Wrexham. Whether that happens this season, I don't know, but that would top what Wimbledon have done, because that would be 4 successive promotions from the non-league. So not only would they beat Wimbledon's 4 seasons to get from bottom to top, they'd also beat Wimbledon's 9 season from non-league to top league. But there are a few others. Swansea City had an incredible 1980s. In 1978, they were in Tier 4. And they got promoted. And by 1982, they're in the top division. So within 5 seasons, they're in the top division. Now, within 5 seasons after that, they're in the bottom division again. I mean, what a roller coaster. If you're a Swansea City fan, it's, crikey. it's terrible. I mean, 5 seasons from bottom to top, 5 seasons from top to bottom, which is incredible. Northampton also did it in 5 seasons in the 60s. But the best one, and there's a few others, you can look at Bournemouth, you can look at Brentford and Wigan, they've all achieved incredible ascensions through the league to get to the top league. Luton Town are an absolute marvel. Of their history is brilliant. Graham, I don't know if you've looked at this. So Luton Town entered the Football League in 1920-21 when the league expanded to 3 divisions. And by 1955-56, they were in the top tier. Within that 35 years, and that includes a war in between as well, they're in the top division. Now, they stay there for a few seasons, and then by 1964-65, in the space of 6 seasons, they're relegated. So from 1960 to 65, they're back in the 4th division. Then in 8 seasons, between 68 and 73, they're back in the top division. So they've kind of gone from the non-leagues into the top division in a 35-year period. Within a 6-season period, they've gone from the bottom league to the top league. Within then an 8-season period they've gone from the top league to the bottom league. And you think that's a whirlwind enough, right? But then they also had three in 2006-07. You'll know this is recent history. 3 relegations in a row. They went from the championship to the non-leagues in 3 seasons, which is incredible. And they then spent 5 seasons in the non-league. And then in 2013-14, they came back into the Football League. And by 2024 season, they were back in the top league again, which is 10 seasons. So it's 1 season more than how Wimbledon did it. Wimbledon did it in 9 seasons. So I don't know how much of that is going to make the edit, Graham. And I could see I lost you like about 20 minutes ago. But what I'm saying is that Wimbledon's ascension from non-leagues to the top division is pretty incredible, but it's not hugely unusual because Luton did it in 10 seasons.
Luton's current trajectory looks like they could be going all the way down again then, doesn't it? If you saw a graph of their kind of league history, it's like a heart monitor, isn't it? It's just kind of oscillating up and down. I have a very good friend who's a Luton fan, so yes.
Presumably there are some, whilst all the young upcoming Luton fans are getting really agitated about this, there must be some old-time Luton fans. This happens every 10 years.
Yeah.
This is just normal.
And my friend Art, he literally has seen it all. He's beyond surprise. I mean, the Wrexham thing's interesting, isn't it? Obviously, they have 2 Hollywood stars leading their charge, whereas although they didn't know it at the time, Wimbledon had a Hollywood star in the middle of their midfield.
Absolutely. And we will be getting on to hear more about the Hollywood side of Wimbledon and life in the top flight after the break. So we are in 1986-87 season, and Wimbledon have made it into the top flight. To some extent, their rise, they come under the radar, haven't they? There'd have been footage, but I think there was still a surprise package when it comes to even in the second tier. But there's no missing them now, and there's no missing how they play. And I think this is where you've got the peak. Football purists probably getting angry about how they play when you see them for the first time, but they really lean into it, don't they? And at this stage, you've already got characters like you've got Beasant whacking it long, and you've got Fashanu, you've got Alan Court, and they kind of lean into it further by signing Vinnie Jones at this point as well.
Wimbledon kind of arrived in the top flight, and no one really knew much about them. And then, of course, when they revealed what their style was, everyone was up in the air. You know, what on earth are these characters? How did this happen? And they compounded that by actually having a really good start to the season, didn't they?
Yeah, I mean, they lose at City in the first game, but then they win four games in a row. So straight away, it's evident that they are not going to be intimidated by being in the top flight, and that they're going to find their feet there, and that their football is hugely effective. This is where I think the Vinnie Jones thing is so emblematic, because they're deliberately signing a former Hodge carrier from Wimbledon, who I don't know if he could ever play or not. I've never really watched his game enough to know whether he was a decent passer or whatever. But it was in Wimbledon's interest to give the impression that he'd almost never kicked a ball before, and he was literally there to kick a player.
Yeah, and he was intimidating, wasn't he? And he intimidated other players. He intimidated other hard men as well. Steve McMahon in the final was a good example. McMahon kind of knew how to handle himself.
Yeah,
Vinnie sorted him out. I mean, you know, in many ways, it was almost like he brought his hod onto the pitch with him, just sort of battering people. But again, I can't remember if he could pass the ball or not. I mean, presumably he must have had, you know, a modicum of ability, but that wasn't his defining characteristic. His defining characteristic was his ability to instill fear and loathing in the opponents. In the course of looking at this, I stumbled across a thing which I have got a link to, which I'll send to you guys. It's in 2007, the Times produced a list of the 50 worst top flight players in history. And Vinnie Jones was ranked 10th. There is another Wimbledon player who was also in this list who we'll doubtless come on to. I will give something away. The worst one, anyone want to have a guess on who the worst one was?
Number 1, the worst top flight footballer in English football.
Yeah.
I just need to qualify this. Is there a criteria? Do they have to have played so many games or so
No,
many
I think they
seasons?
just have to have
So they could
appeared.
just. Oh, well, see, Ali Dye, surely from Southampton's got to be up
Spot
there.
on. Spot
Yeah.
on. George Weah's cousin, apparently. Yeah.
Wow, that's fantastic. Definitely Massimo Taibbi's in that list as well. I'm absolutely sure of it.
He is.
So, Vinnie Jones, you're the football purist, Jamie?
I mean, he wasn't a player I liked. I mean, you've seen me play football. I think tackling should be banned from football. I think it's one of the worst things you can have in the game, to be honest. But he plays top flight football for over 10 years. Now, the big portion of that is with Wimbledon in 2 spells. And in between that, he's at Leeds United, who are a pretty decent team at that point, Sheffield United and Chelsea. He only stays at these teams for a season, I think, all 3 of them before he's back at Wimbledon. So I don't think you can hide on the football pitch for over 10 years at the top flight. Yes, he was physical. Yes, he was aggressive. And yes, he liked to put a reducer on, as Steve McMahon found out in the 1988 FA Cup final, which was super effective. But, you know, football it's a collective game, team game, played by individuals. And all individuals have to do their job. So whilst you've got your goalkeeper who's stopping them, your striker that's scoring them, your midfielder who's creating, you've got some midfielders who are disrupting, and Vinnie Jones was a brilliant disruptor. You have to question the man's character. He's putting his body on the line because he is making some horrendous tackles. I mean, he's a classic case for Danny Baker's Hard Men of Football, isn't he? You know, he's probably on the cover of most of those VHS cassettes, but he's still brave enough to put his body on the line and to make some of the ridiculous tackles. The McMahon one's brilliant. I mean, we'll come back to it because we need to talk about the FA Cup final and Lawrie Sanchez in particular. But I mean, that's a red card all day. I mean, in this day and age, he doesn't even get booked. He doesn't even get booked.
He does, however, get booked after 5 seconds for a foul on Dane Whitehouse for
I thought it was 3 seconds.
Chelsea playing Sheffield United. So which was the fastest ever booking at some point or another, might still be.
I think Jones actually worked on the theory of deliberately putting a heavy one in early on the basis that the ref might be loath to dish a card out that early in the game. And, you know, on that particular occasion, they called his bluff. But I do seem to remember, because was the McMahon one very early in the game?
7-8 minutes, I think.
Yeah. You know, clearly, you know, that was part of his modus operandi. Regardless of what your view is of the quality of the films that Jones has been in, he clearly is a man who has a vision and a drive to achieve stuff, because he was a hod carrier. Then he was playing in the FA Cup final. Then he was starring with, you know, the likes of Benicio del Toro in films. And it's kind of like, he's achieved a hell of a lot, the fella. And I suppose you've got to take your hat off to him, because he wasn't a great footballer. I don't think he's a great actor, but look what he's done.
He's living proof of having misplaced confidence can take you really far in the world. It's absolutely brilliant. And I admire him for it. I really do.
Not a great footballer, not a great actor, but you wouldn't tell that to his face, I suspect.
No, absolutely
brilliant
not.
footballer, brilliant actor.
Yeah.
My favourite actor of all time, I'd say.
He forms part of a sort of bizarre showbiz collective playing for Wimbledon, doesn't he?
Yeah, well, Fashanu has carved a bit of a career for himself, hasn't he, in various television guises. I'm a Celebrity, I think it was the second series of I'm a Celebrity, so he got in quite early for that, didn't he, Fash?
Yeah.
He was runner-up in it, I think. So he did actually quite well in that. And he then also went on to appear, was it Dancing on Ice? Dancing on Ice. The only footballer, I've done a little bit of background on this, he's the only footballer to have appeared in both I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here and Dancing on Ice.
Wow.
This is good.
He was then in Gladiators, wasn't he?
Presented it.
Yeah.
Presented Gladiators.
Presented it.
And he also presented Deal or No Deal, Nigeria.
Yeah,
Oh, this is brilliant.
Which I'm not quite sure why they have to have a specific Nigerian version of it. But
I think that one's different because you don't open boxes. You have to open an email that gets sent to you with some offerings money trapped in the account.
Yeah, you just have to send your bank details, and Dennis Wise also featured in I'm a Celebrity. One of the shorter people to ever feature in it, by all accounts. And this kind of got me going down a bit of a rabbit hole about which teams have been most represented on reality TV shows? Because I thought Wimbledon have got two. Surely they must be one of the most represented. But no, kind of what you got to remember is that most of the footballers will have done this at the end of their career, so they'll have had a number of clubs associated with them. But West Ham, five I'm a Celebrity contestants have played for West Ham. Do you want to have a guess?
Yeah, go on.
Harry Redknapp's.
Yeah, Harry Redknapp.
First.
Yeah.
Go on, Graham, your turn.
Okay, so, how can I match Redknapp?
I don't watch it these days, so...
2019 was the most recent.
I can think of one more.
Go on.
Neil Razor Ruddock.
Neil Razor Ruddock, correct.
Great shout.
Certainly with two of them, West Ham would not be the club you'd immediately associate with them. They kind of went their late doors.
Late doors, because I was thinking, has Joe Cole done something like this?
No.
Man in the media? No.
Stuart Pearce?
Ian Wright.
Ian Wright, right, yeah.
Sheringham?
Stuart Pearce.
Sheringham do it.
No. Shall I just tell you?
Yeah, I put me out of my misery, yeah.
Kieran Dyer.
Wow.
And Wayne Bridge, who played for West Ham.
Wow, that's just that is a moment of fame. Was he booked with John Terry, the two of them doing it at the same time?
No, John Terry never did it. Bridges' ex-wife did it at some point, but no, that would have been quite interesting, wouldn't it? Yeah. Most successful footballer on I'm a Celebrity. Any guesses on that one? Fashanu was second. He was runner-up.
Didn't Harry Redknapp win it?
He did.
What about Jill Scott?
Jill Scott won it as well.
Great shout.
Redknapp and Jill Scott both won it.
Fantastic.
Do you want me to talk about Strictly Come Dancing and Dancing on Ice?
I mean, this is a podcast in its own entirety now, so we will get back to Wimbledon at some point, I'm sure.
David Seaman enjoyed Dancing on Ice so much that he reappeared in it 8 years after his first appearance. Sorry, I'm over milking this, and I really.
This is brilliant. You have to come back to this as well. I think save some material, Stu.
Okay.
Because I think the next time you're on, we need to kind of weave in celebrities that have appeared on reality TV shows, so we can
trip, yeah.
So we can follow up on part 2 of this amazing list. This is incredible.
I'll leave it there.
I mean, this is very much the modern world in terms of where ex-footballers will go. They either go into TV punditry, football punditry, or spin-off TV football-related shows, or they go into these reality TV shows that you've become the expert on now, Stu, which is fantastic. But before celebrity shows, footballers did move into television. So Danny Blanchflower, the Tottenham captain, Northern Ireland, when he finished in the mid-1960s, he hosted a quiz show called Crisscross Quiz.
Did he really?
So it's not football related. And he did a junior Crisscross Quiz as well for children. So you've got a famous footballer who's gone into the world of TV. But and I've got quite a few of these, and I can't compete with Stu, but I will share one, my favourite one, really, Garth Crooks. Now, we know Garth Crooks for being on Football Focus and his Team of the Week and a football pundit, and he's appeared on, as a pundit in the World Cup when they've been on. Not only did he guest appearance in 1982 with Peter Powell on Top of the Pops.
Yeah.
After he finished playing football, he was briefly the host of a late night BBC TV show called Dispatch Box, which was a politics show that he hosted. He was the Andrew Neil before Andrew Neil.
Bloody hell. I have to look that up.
So we seem to have drifted. We seem to have drifted somewhat, but a very entertaining rabbit hole. So Wimbledon, they're pretty comfortable in that season. It's a pretty comfortable first season where they've shocked everyone. We've seen the breakthrough of some more players. John Scales has come from Bristol Rovers. Eric Young has joined. Terry Phelan has joined. So lots of players who go on to become big names with Wimbledon. But there's another turning point at the end of the season, because this should be the end of the story, isn't it? Because we get to the end of the season and Dave Bassett leaves. And given how central he is to the Wimbledon story, you would be thinking that this is probably the end of the road.
Yeah.
Do we know why he left?
I don't. He went to Watford, didn't he? So I guess Watford are a bigger club than Wimbledon, and always were. So maybe that was the attraction. I don't know. I mean, both he and Sam Hammam were quite volatile characters. it's not beyond the bounds of possibility that they'd, fallen out. He might have thought, I've done all I can here.
And Watford feels like a perfect fit because, of course, they are the original long ball merchants. And
Indeed.
Grant Taylor was kind of seen, and it had, they had a similar rise through the divisions quite rapidly. It's a format that works. Dave Bassett is a really natural choice to take over at Watford. A very good friend of mine is a Watford fan. He will still break out in a sweat if you mention Harry Bassett's name. It couldn't have gone less well. He got rid of a whole load of really decent players. He's gone by January. It's really terrible move for him in that respect. But it is quite nice. He signs Glyn Hodges, so Glyn Hodges goes with him. I mean, he signs Glyn Hodges everywhere he goes, but Hodges goes. Nigel Winterburn, who you've mentioned, and is sort of their most consistent player. He's quite easy to forget in this team, actually, I think, because, his big success comes onto Arsenal. A lot of these players, whilst they go on to do quite a lot of things, this is probably their most notable moment.
Yeah.
Whereas Nigel Winterburn, you can actually forget, but he was pretty much their standout, most consistent player. It also doesn't feel like a very Wimbledon player compared to what because
he has quality.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, bit of transition, but they still seem to keep going and keep developing and playing the way they previously played. And I think as much as anything, Bassett was replaced by Bobby Gould. And I think the word pragmatist is probably quite well applied to Bobby Gould, in that he kind of saw what he had and thought, okay, it ain't broke, I'm not going to try and fix it. So he brought in players of a similar mindset and just kept on with the old model.
What's fascinating as well, because Bobby Gould comes in and I think he brings in Don Howe as his assistant as well, which is an incredible move because Don Howe is probably a well-known coach at that point. He's had a stint with Arsenal.
Yeah.
I think he's just recently out of work. I think he's been replaced by, I think it was George Graham. I think, is it Don Howe who's getting replaced by George Graham? I
think you're right, of that. Actually, yeah.
That feels quite a step change in terms of where Wimbledon are. And I think selling players is just part and parcel of what they've been doing. I think this taps back into the guy who's running it in the background, who's in the foreground, is Sam Human. I think he's savvy, and he's, I think they bought Winterburn for something like 30-odd thousand. They sell him for, was it 350,000, 10 times more? I don't know. I don't have the numbers at hand. I didn't check but I know it was a significant improvement. And they do this with a number of players.
350 they got for Winterburn,
It's an incredible piece of business. But you go from what Wimbledon has been for the 10 years as they've gone through the leagues, and they get to the 87, 88 season. They've got a brand new manager, but they've also got a fairly savvy coach who does divide opinion, Don Howe. But I don't think anyone can deny the fact that he knows football exceptionally well.
Yeah, and he'd been around the block, as you say. He'd been at Arsenal. Was he? He was in the England setup for a while, wasn't he?
Yes. Yeah.
He managed West Brom, so he kind of knew his stuff. And of course, him and Bobby Gould had crossed over at Arsenal when Gould was a player at Arsenal, so they had history there. But it was interesting, isn't it? Because Bobby Gould came in from Bristol Rovers, who at the time were third division.
Yeah.
And you can't really see a Premier League side doing that now, can you?
No, his appointment was a bit from nowhere.
Yeah.
Like I say, I think the potential for the wheels to come off in this season is absolutely huge because you've lost this iconic manager. You've lost one or two of these, in Winterburn, you probably lost your best or most cultured player.
Kevin Gage went, I think, didn't he? And he was, I think that's both fullbacks have disappeared. And Gage was, again, one of these players that's quite often overlooked, but I think he was a very good player and went on to play a few seasons for Villa, and I think might have featured in the England squad a couple of times. Yeah, as you say, there wasn't much reason to be particularly optimistic on it.
You've got second season syndrome there, haven't you? Teams should be working out how to play Wimbledon by this stage. If it was as simple as we didn't know anything about them, they're done, And I think people underestimated Wimbledon for the entire time they're in that league, and it just keeps showing. And they have another, despite big shifts there, and they only make one signing or one significant signing, Terry Gibson. joins 200,000. I think that's a record transfer. The old Coventry striker, I think of him as.
I wasn't a fan of Terry Gibson at Manchester United, and so I wasn't. I think United got rid of the right Gibson when they got rid of Terry Gibson, in my opinion. But yeah, not my cup of tea.
No,
but a very good fit for Wimbledon, I think.
What was quite interesting was that they signed Terry Phelan and Terry Gibson, and Wimbledon at this point were viewed as a very physical. You know, you had Young and Thorne, and you had Sanchez and Jones and Fashanu. These are big units. And then you've got Terry Gibson and Terry Phelan. If they stood on each other's shoulders, would be about the same height as Fashanu. And then you've got Dennis Wise, great limbo dancer.
Yeah.
But the three short guys, they embody the attitude really, because all of them are chippy. All of them are kind of, feisty and argumentative. And kind of in the way of short people down the years, they all had a lot of big mates who could come along and support them if the going got rough,
That's exactly right.
What Gould does, he does basically invent a new back four for Wimbledon in that season. Scales, Young, Clive Goodyear and Phelan, who's come in. It feels like a step change. And as we know, a step change here in a positive direction for Wimbledon. It's almost like that Bobby Gould has come in and has kind of seen, or has been lucky enough to move this team that's had an incredible journey over the last 10 years onwards.
The other thing that is, to their enormous credit, they finish, I think, 7th that season. Again, and that's with the distraction of a FA Cup run to their first final. Most teams, you would expect to get dragged into a proper relegation struggle. You would expect to be gradually kind of slipping away as enthusiasm, as the focus shifts. But this side is really focused, and this cup run is sort of the high point, isn't it? Their games wouldn't be the ones televised. Again, they're not a glamour side, so I think they beat West Brom, Mansfield. Beat Newcastle in the 5th round, which is away at St James's Park, which is a good result.
I always thought that was the game in which the famous Vinnie Jones getting his hands on Gaza incident occurred. But having researched it, it wasn't that game. It had happened 2 weeks previously. And so I can imagine that Jones thought, okay, I'm going to give him something to remember when we play him in the cup in 2 weeks' time. Clearly it worked. I don't think Gaza did much in that.
They play Watford. Harry Bassett's gone by this stage, but they beat Watford 2-1 in the quarterfinals, and then Luton, who they beat 2-1 in the semi-final. I think at White Hart Lane.
Yeah. And I read that in sort of the typical Wimbledon anti-establishment fashion, the team arrived at White Hart Lane in a procession of minicabs and the club minibus. Rather than hire a coach and do it all properly, Gould's clearly trying to maintain that ethos of we're the little guys, come to take on the Goliaths. The fact that the Goliath in this particular incident was Luton kind of shows how small Wimbledon were. And actually, at that time, Luton were a decent side. They were finishing top 10 in the Premier League. One of the peaks of their
winning cups.
Yeah. I think they won. Did they win the?
I think they won the League Cup that season, in 1988.
Yeah.
This game against Liverpool is seen as one of the greatest cup final shocks ever. Yet, you are talking about. Probably already at this stage is an established top flight side playing another. I mean, it's essentially 1st v 7th. So it's not, this isn't like West Ham beating Arsenal like, in 1980 or whenever that was. Yeah, I think part of the reason it's seen as such a shock is that this Liverpool side are ridiculously good, aren't they?
Yeah, you got Beardsley in there, you got Barnes, you got McMahon, you got Alan Hansen, Steve Nicol, the Ray Houghton. I mean, very, very good players. And I think it's also kind of, because like you say, Graham, it's 1st v 7. So it's actually less of a shock than Palace beating Man City last season. But because of where Wimbledon had come from and because of, Liverpool's history at the time, they won multiple titles in the previous 10 years. I think everyone expected Liverpool to just kind of roll them over. And famously, they didn't.
Yeah, it's a clash of styles as well. I mean,
Yeah.
this is an incredibly brilliant Liverpool team. Probably one of the best Liverpool teams of all time. The way that Barnes, Beardsley and Houghton as well, just combined with those kind of triangles. The clash of styles are crazy. So you've got Wimbledon, who we talked about, direct and physical. Liverpool, they're fluid. They interchange. Both teams are playing effectively a 4-4-2. But whilst Wimbledon are rigid in their 4-4-2, Liverpool are interchanging positions. They're fluid. They're moving into different spaces. Wimbledon are bang, long balls, flick-ons, while Liverpool are short, fast combinations. So whilst the league position suggests that there isn't much between them other than 6 places, 7 places, in terms of where the teams are, I think Liverpool are worlds away from this Wimbledon team. And absolutely, I think everyone is thinking, this is the double for Liverpool. They've just won the league. They're going to win this final. It's super comfortable. And if you're a Manchester United fan, a 16-year-old, temperamental Manchester United fan, you don't want to watch the final because you know Liverpool are going to win it, even though you want to watch the final because you really want Wimbledon to win it.
Mm-hmm.
Jones's tackle on McMahon aside, which is it is
it's brilliant. It's brilliant. It's just brilliant.
Yeah, all McMahon must have done that so many times with so many other players. Must kind of know it's coming, but absolute statement tackle.
I can't claim to remember this at the time, but one of the things that I read was that Don Howe came up with the tactic of pushing Dennis Wise up on John Barnes, because Liverpool, apparently that left-hand side of Liverpool's team, Barnes, Beardsley and Houghton, that was where a lot of their success had come from through the season. So basically he got Wise to just sit on Barnes, and that negated a lot of, what Liverpool's creative options were, because Barnes was largely marked out of the game. So, you mentioned earlier, Jamie, Don Howe, a very experienced tactician, and I think that came to fruition in the final.
It's genius. For me, it's absolutely genius. And Don Howe deserves so much credit for it, should that be the case. And I read the same things, that Dennis Wise was employed to do this job on John Barnes. Because the team talk could have been like, well, Barnes, Beardsley, Houghton, they just dominate. We can't get the ball from them. So Don Howe looks at it like, well, we don't need to stop all of them. We stop one of them. And by default, we stop them. And that's exactly what happened. So, Liverpool's passing game, their fluid interchange has been disrupted. So they have to have a plan B. It's not Wimbledon. Wimbledon have a plan A, but obviously they've still got to score.
Yeah.
If they're stopping Liverpool from scoring, they've got to get a goal themselves.
Liverpool aren't fluent, but they do create chances and they get an offside goal. It's a hint of inevitability that it is going to eventually go their way. And then I think the turning point has to be the penalty, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
I like the fact that you want to talk about the penalty, but I mean, we really should get to the actual match fact, the 1-0. And I don't think Liverpool have done their homework on this one.
No.
Because Lawrie Sanchez, I've not seen much of Lawrie Sanchez, but the bits I've seen of him was the master at getting the flick on.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what he does in this scenario. So stop Sanchez, and maybe you stop Fashanu, and maybe you stop Sanchez from scoring.
Yeah. And, Dennis Wise relieved himself of marking John Barnes, and he took the free kick. And you say it kind of, I do remember seeing this, and it was almost like, in its simplicity, it was brilliant. And no one got anywhere near Sanchez. And you kind of, you thought, well, what were they doing? Where were the defence? And they never really came back, did they? I mean, okay, They got the pen, they missed the pen, but I don't recall Wimbledon being on the ropes. I don't remember there being loads of near misses and stuff. They just seemed to kind of close the game down.
And it's a great moment. I mean, this side is littered with players who've played for Wimbledon on the rise up there. But it is brilliant that both Dave Bassett and Alan Corr have been there pretty much from the start.
Yeah.
Feature in the FA Cup final, which is extraordinarily enough, and that Dave Bassett should have such a starring role.
Yeah, and it wasn't a fluke that he saved the penalty. He'd studied which way Aldrich put his kicks. He tended to put the ball to the left. So he waited for it and he went left. And apparently afterwards, Beasant said, I should have caught it, really, which I thought was quite nice.
It's brilliant for Beasant because he's done his research, which is fantastic. Again, another thing, you kind of think in the 90s, football was just people just put their best 11 players on the pitch and there was no tactics and everyone just hoped for the best. We know that's not the case. And we know with this Wimbledon team, that's not the case.
I mean, John Aldridge has been on fire, and amongst the fantastic thing he does that season for Liverpool is score a lot of penalties. So it doesn't occur to you for a minute that he's going to miss out. This, I think, it's the first one he misses all season.
It's the first penalty missed in an FA Cup final as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
So up until that point, all penalties that had been taken in FA Cup finals had been converted.
And as you say, Wimbledon, they do hang on. Laurie Cunningham, who it's worth mentioning, has joined the club on a short-term deal. He comes on as a sub for, I think, for Alan Cork. The tragedy there, this is his last ever game. Cunningham dies in a car crash in Spain in the summer. And then Terry Gibson comes off. Now, he's replaced by John Scales, who I think actually does play up front. And they do see it out. I don't think there are too many more alarms, as you say, Jamie.
No, I think this is a brilliant Wimbledon team. When you look at it man for man, the defence, and you talk about the quality that they're bringing off on the bench, because John Scales goes on and has a fairly moderately decent career with Liverpool as well.
Yeah, and if you look at the team, there's internationals throughout the team, aren't there? I mean, Beasant made 1 or 2 England appearances, I think. Eric Young, Wales, Terry Phelan, Republic of Ireland, Sanchez, Northern Ireland. So Clive Goodyear, I think, is probably the least known player in this 11.
Yeah. He's the one player I had to do some research. I don't really remember him at all. And he's only plays like 26, 27 games or something over a period of time. But he's playing at the right time to get a cup final appearance out of it.
The one fact I managed to turn up about Clive Goodyear was that he was the man that gave away the penalty.
Yeah, that's right.
So Wimbledon create this amazing magic moment of history. I'm fascinated by the legacy of all of this. Again, Wimbledon are just taken for granted. They're still seen as so they've won the cup and they finished 7th in the league, and yet still their players are picked off. So Beasant, I mean, it's extraordinary that that's Dave Bassant's final contribution, isn't it?
Last game, wasn't it?
Penalty.
Yeah.
But I think this has an influence in the boardroom again. And I don't know if this is true, but I picked up the stuff that I've watched and read doing the research of this particular Wimbledon team. Sam Hammam says to Bobby Gould, you need to sell all your players now because he's never going to get any better than this.
Yeah.
So he's probably seeing that the market value of these footballers is really high. And we know that because Dennis Wise goes to Chelsea for 1.6 million? It's incredible. So I think Sam Hammam is thinking he's almost like opening the door to teams to come and buy his players and break up the band because he knows financially he's going to be in a strong position after this FA Cup final win.
It's interesting you say that, actually, because I was looking at some of the players that they sold in the immediate aftermath or later on went for record fees for the signing club. So Wise went to Chelsea for 1.6 million, which was a Chelsea club record at the time. Phelan went to Man City. This was actually a couple of years later. He was City's record signing at the time.
I think Scales is a record signing for a defender for Liverpool when he joined
something like that. Yeah. So clearly, old Sam Hammam was not daft, was he?
And when you look at that side, if you ignore, the exception of Paul Clive Goodyear and Alan Cork, who we've established no one pays any money for.
Yeah.
This side, which is assembled from next to nothing, but they all go for money. Dave Bassett, 850,000. Eric Young, about the same. Andy Thorne, 850,000. Phelan, 2.5. Lawrie Sanchez, I think he's 500,000 or so when he moves on.
Vinnie Jones 650,000. Leeds paid 650,000. That's more than Ridley Scott paid for him.
Fashanu's there for ages, but I think Villa pays something like
he went to Villa, didn't he? Yeah.
Or 1.35 million.
Yep.
What I find so extraordinary about it is that they keep selling these players, and it doesn't really make any difference. No. They stay in the top flight for 14 years. Yeah. I mean, it's just an incredible achievement, isn't it?
Yeah, and I was going to say, Bobby Gould kind of held on for a couple of years, and then he left. I can't remember why he left, actually. Probably, again, a bust up with Hammam. You had a brief period of Peter With and Ray Harford. And you kind of got the sense things were ebbing away a little bit. And then Joe Kinnear comes in, who re-establishes this bonkers, crazy gang kind of attitude. And as you say, sustained it for another 8 or 9 years.
Yeah, and Joe Kinnear comes in at the birth of the Premier League as well, as the Premier League's fairly young when Joe Kinnear's there, and Wimbledon are an established team in the Premier League.
Yeah.
And yeah, he really does keep the club pretty much competing in the top 10 positions until their slow death and relegation out of the Premier League in 1999, 2000.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because we kind of edged around. I hate the phrase, the crazy gang. It's a Motsonism too far for me. And he'd obviously written that down beforehand and thought, I can use it. But, you know, I'd be interested to ask Wimbledon supporters who were the crazy gang, because there was obviously a core of people or players that epitomised that. I kind of think that was probably, you know, mid-80s to 1990 was where that really kind of, you know, that was the core of the crazy gang. So the likes of Beasant, Dennis Wise, Vinnie Jones, Sanchez, Alan Cork. I think Cork was probably slightly more sensible than most of the crazy guys. Yeah, I mean, just, you know, who are the definitive crazy gang members?
Yeah.
Fashanu, missed him.
Fashanu is, if anyone's in that bracket, is Fashanu. I mean, some of the things I read, he sounds like a bully. Now, that was just the culture at the time, and it's probably the culture of the football club. So it was accepted, I'm sure. And it probably wasn't seen as bullying, but there'll be a lot of intimidation going on. And I think Fashanu has been quoted saying to get respect, you need to have an element of fear. So I think that kind of ruling through fear. And he was a big, strong, beautiful, intimidating man as well. I mean, he really was. And he played football with every physical part of his body, and he could score goals, and he was a good goal scorer. But yeah, I mean, elbows would land in certain places that would be outlawed today.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Definitely so. As you say, Joe Kinnear, and you're absolutely right, he does recreate that atmosphere and that feeling. And it's a sustained period they had there, but they are finally, their time comes, relegated in 2002, I think it is, or 2000.
I think it's 2000, but the writing was on the wall.
Yes.
Sam Hammam was looking to get out. I think he sold his stake to a bunch of Norwegians. There was always the question of
Bolson, the brief unsuccessful period as manager.
That's correct.
The boot wearing man.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so I mean, it just felt that this football club, unfortunately, was doomed for something else. So it was a journey that was never going to continue, because it always felt where they were positioned in South London, and because of the fact that they were probably never going to get back to Plough Lane in this particular era, they were always going to be renting space from other football teams. It just felt like their destiny was written, unfortunately, and then you get this incredible unfair ending. But the brilliance of the story is that they have a rebirth. You know, the supporters do what football fans do. They love their football club, and they decide to recreate Wimbledon in the shape of AFC Wimbledon. And now we can marvel at the fact that they're a Football League team doing exceptionally well once again. And hopefully at some point, maybe they'll reach the Premier League again, which would be an incredibly beautiful story.
I think two pivotal dates in kind of the demise of Wimbledon FC and the establishment of AFC Wimbledon are around the home grounds. I think, you know, as soon as Wimbledon moved out of Plough Lane, it was a matter of time, really, before they ceased to exist in that kind of entity. And, you know, they were, you know, ground sharing at Selhurst Park, blah, blah, blah. And there's various talks going on about this, that and the other, but nothing ever kind of came to fruition. And actually, they still had a pretty good team in that period. Vinnie Jones had come back. They had players like Robbie Earle, Dean Holdsworth, Marcus Gale, Jason Ewell. So that they had a good team. But I think the soul of the club had kind of disappeared with Plough Lane. And then AFC Wimbledon, you know, started playing in local parks. They then went to Kings Meadow, you know, Kingstonian's old ground. But where they've started to really kick on is since their new ground was built in Plough Lane, you know, 200 yards up the road from the original stadium.
Yeah.
And they now have they're a proper club, and they are moving in the right direction. And not unlike the first Wimbledon, they kind of bounced up and down a little bit between the bottom two divisions. But they now seem to be having quite a good season in League One. And good luck to them, you know. I've been to see them a few times. And do you know the weird stat about who the first player was to score for the reborn AFC Wimbledon? You probably know this.
I do.
Right.
No, go on.
Notorious for some other activities rather than football. It's a gentleman called Glenn Mulcair,
Yes, it is. Yeah,
who
Glenn
was
Mulcair. Yes.
who was a private investigator who was imprisoned for his role in the News of the World phone tapping scandal.
God.
He
So
was
if you
the
watch
first.
if you watch the Hacks, or I don't know what it's
Yes,
called, there's the ITV
David
documentary
Tennant.
on there at the moment.
Oh no,
He,
there's a documentary. There's also
the series, yeah, David Tennant, yeah, Glenn Mulcair. I knew it was someone random. Glenn Mulcair. That is just fantastic.
He appears in it. Yeah, so there you go. From he was the first player to score for AFC Wimbledon. Anyway,
before we get to ranking this team, I just want to touch on the man who leaves our story slightly early, I think, before his time. And I want to talk back about Harry Bassett. So he's gone off to Watford, and that's all gone horrendously wrong. And then he gets another job at Sheffield United, which continues to go. They're already, I think, destined for disaster, and they get relegated as well. So he has the slightly dubious honour, doesn't do things by halves, of getting two teams relegated that season.
Yes, but,
But he then just goes back to normal Harry Bassett business, and he gets double promotions for Sheffield United. They're pretty established in the top flight, and it is weird because you kind of think of him as Wimbledon's manager, but he actually at Sheffield United for longer. So I think it's like 300 games in charge of Wimbledon, but almost 400 at Sheffield United.
Really?
Yeah. So it's really odd.
Yeah.
And then perhaps because he's been there for so long, it is less surprising how much of the old band he gets back together. So this is proper back of the envelope calculation, but just having gone through some random searches on it, Simon Tracy, the keeper, Vinnie Jones, Glyn Hodges, Mark Morris, Kevin Gage.
Doesn't Alan Cork go there?
Alan Cork, Ian Gale, John Gannon. They are all former Wimbledon players who play under Dave Bassett at Sheffield United.
Doesn't Wally Downs end up?
Oh, I wonder if Wally Downs. Yeah, that Wally Downs must have. I think
Wally Downs ended up at Sheffield United.
There are two other players who play for Sheffield United under Dave Bassett who I just think, well, they were meant to. One is, Wally Downs is one. Wally Downs plays for Sheffield United.
Good call.
The two who I enjoy who play for Sheffield United under Dave Bassett, one is Chris Wilder, which you can absolutely see. I like absolutely. That just fits.
Yeah.
Just fits. Yeah. The other, you never really settled in the South, Billy Whitehurst.
Hey, the man who had more red cards than Vinnie Jones.
So, yes.
Good work.
Fantastic.
I have a quick Lawrie Sanchez anecdote for which I cannot guarantee the veracity of. It may be an apocryphal story, but when Sanchez got the manager's job at Fulham, and he'd been manager of Wycombe Wanderers, he'd taken them to the semi-finals of the FA Cup, got the manager's job at Fulham, and the first thing he did was called his old mate Dave Bassett and said, "Dave, I've got the manager's job at Fulham. I want you to come on board as goalkeeping coach." And Beasant said, "That's fine, but what about the guy who's currently in position as goalkeeping coach at Fulham?" And Sanchez said, "Don't worry, I'll sort that out." And Beasant said, "Well, I am slightly worried because I am the goalkeeping coach at Fulham." Now, that may not be true, but I hope it is.
Too good. Right, okay, we need to get to ranking this team. As a reminder, 5 categories of greatness, all-time greats at the top, true greats, second tier category, middle category, touch of greatness, edge of greatness are second to bottom, and then blink of greats. Jamie, what are you going to do?
Well, I'm conscious of time, and I'm conscious that I've got a few things to add in the post after this as well. So I'm going to try to keep it short. So I love this story. I love the story of this football club in its entirety as well, through its kind of tenacity of trying to get into the league. When it gets into the league, its rapid ascension through to the top division, like no other football team has ever done in the game in England. It winning the FA Cup against one of the best football teams of that era, and then sustaining itself in the Premier League for such a sustained period of time, and also being reborn into a new football team and coming back and having almost the same trajectory, albeit in a completely different era. This, for me, has everything about the third tier touch of greatness. This is an absolute touch of greatness.
What about you, Stu?
I share your sentiments, Jamie, regarding the story and, how they dragged themselves up and how they reinvented themselves and how they kind of went against the grain. And I love that. I admire that. But were they a great team? I'd go edge of greatness, and that's probably just edge of greatness. I was kind of tempted to go blink of greatness, but edge of greatness for me. A lot to admire, but the quality of their football was not one of the admirable things, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think I would probably be on the side of Stu here. It feels harsh because we've given teams who haven't won anything a touch of greatness, but then I think if we start to unpick our previous rankings, then we'll be here all night because they just don't make any sense. We just need to rip them all off and start again.
That way madness lies. Yeah,
it's true.
But I think they are at a kind of moment time. It is extraordinary to have achieved what they have achieved, and it is brilliant to have put one over the establishment and to continue to do that for so long. But were they great to watch? Were they a great football team? Probably not. Fantastic characters, fantastic achievements. But I think I'm with you there. I'm going to say the rise of Wimbledon, edge of greatness.
Well, just a couple of points of order, really. I think we should find out that other Wimbledon player in the top 100 of rubbish Premier League footballers, or top 5 footballers that Stu mentioned.
Oh, yeah.
But before that, just carrying on the theme of celebrities that have been born out of this Wimbledon team, and I guess this is going to be more of a minor celebrity that went into the world of television, non-football related television. So there was a Wimbledon player that played in the early 1990s through to the late 90s called Stuart Burgess.
Right.
He actually went on to present a couple of TV shows, Big Strong Boys, and also I think there was another one called, it was to do with houses. So Houses Under the Hammer or something like that. No, hold on, I'm going to get this right. Sorry, Graham. I lost my page where I had it. Yeah, he definitely he definitely presents Big Strong Boys.
That sounds like a specialist adult channel that I don't subscribe
to. Very much
to.
does, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. So not only do we have Vinnie Jones and John Fashanu, who have gone into the world of television and film outside of football, Stuart Burgess as well. And he also had a role as a goalkeeper, a French goalkeeper, in the Steve Martin remake of The Pink Panther in 2006.
The name of the programme that you are thinking of is Houses Behaving Badly, which clearly no one would have come up with that title if it wasn't piggybacking Men Behaving Badly, which presumably was in its heyday then.
Brilliant, yeah. He didn't make a lot of appearances for Wimbledon. He also went on and had a short spell with Wycombe Wanderers. But I think he's married to a TV celebrity or an actress, Lucy Armstrong, and I think maybe through those connections. And I think he's a good-looking boy, which is always good for TV.
We are after another Wimbledon player who makes the top 50.
I've found the whole list, actually.
Fabulous.
So Massimo Tabi, who you mentioned earlier, Jamie, is at number 49.
He's in.
Who else we got? Other than that, David May is in here, Blackburn, Man United.
Well, that's harsh. David May, superstar, got more medals than Shearer.
Larry Lloyd, Liverpool and Nottingham Forest.
This list is, I
will send this on to you. At number 22, our other Wimbledon friend, John Fashanu. Yeah.
There you go. Fash the Bass. I've got a little anecdote on him as well. Well, I'm going to really balls this up because it's somebody else's story, which is pretty much most of the stuff on what we do on these things. But as we discussed, John Fashanu had a reputation for being an intimidated hard man in this Wimbledon team. And when he was captain of Wimbledon, he used to, and it was back in the era, I don't think it still happens, where the captains go in and meet the referee before the game so the referee can kind of lay down, this is how I'm seeing the game. And Fashanu had a reputation of going in with basically a towel, his flip-flops, his torso hanging out, his muscles bulging and just kind of giving intimidation vibes. And he's done this at one game with Nottingham Forest when Des Walker is the manager, and Brian Clough's gone in there with Des Walker and he said to the referees, this man Fashanu, he's got a habit of leaving elbows into Desmond's face. Graham, see, I'm well behaved, Graham. I'm not doing the accent.
You're
It may
done.
come out in a minute, but I'm holding back. And the game goes off, and Des Walker, he's bullied out of the game by John Fashanu. So the teams meet again, and once again, Fashanu rocks up in his towel, his flip flops, and his muscles bulging, and Des Walker's there. And then Brian Clough is out of his traditional green sweater, and he's suited and he's booted, and he's got these big heavy brogues on. And he's going in, and Des Walker's thinking, why is the gaffer dressed like this? This doesn't make any sense. So the referee is laying out the lines, and Clough's gone, now referee, this guy, Fashanu, leaves elbows in my Desmond's face. And as he's doing this, Brian Clough, with his big heavy brogues on, stamps on John Fashanu's foot. And John Fashanu gives out this scream. And then Brian Clough turns to Des Walker and says, see, Desmond, he's not that hard. Totally fucked that up.
Okay, well, we should wrap it up there. An epic one. Looking forward to the edit on this one. But it's been a lot of fun. I've enjoyed it a lot. Stu, thank you as ever.
Pleasure, guys. Once again, thanks for inviting me. Great fun.
Jamie, thank you also yourself.
Thank you, Graham. And thank you again, Stuart. I don't think I've ever been in your company for 1 second and not enjoyed myself. And I mean that in a totally platonic way. So thank you so much for bringing this wonderful football team to life with your incredibly brilliant storytelling. Thank you.
Thank you, mate.
And unbelievably, I think we might be leaving 1980s next week. We're certainly leaving British shores. We are going to be talking about an incredible story of Kaiserslautern. I will work on my pronunciation for next week. Kaiserslautern next week.